Hello and welcome back to the Reapers. Today we're in helicopters and we're looking at the effect of ground effect on helicopters. So we've looked at the effect of ambient temperature changes on helicopters and on fixed wing planes, and we've looked at the effect of ground effect on fixed wing airplanes, and that turned out to be a very complex conclusion, and one in which the fixed wing aircraft had very different effects from ground effect on them. And when we're talking about ground effect, I should explain it's the effect of when an aircraft, a fixed wing or rotary wing, is operating above ground at a distance of less than one wingspan of that aircraft, and it creates various effects. Now with the fixed wing planes flying in the ground effect zone, like I said, we had a whole plethora of different effects. Some planes were sucked down towards the ground in the ground effect zone, some planes were bounced up into the sky, some planes went faster in the ground effect, some planes went slower in the ground effect, and it was very strange. Some planes had different effects over land that they had to sea, some planes had the same effect over land that they did with sea, and I'm still waiting for your conclusion to that. But today we're going to look at rotary wing aircraft. Now the general acceptance of ground effect is that it gives you more lift due to physics that I can't explain to you because I just can't possibly understand them myself. I need you to explain them to me, if anything. And as well as giving you extra lift, they also in some cases can reduce your longitudinal drag, and that allowed some, for instance, airplanes to fly faster in the ground effect zone than they could outside of the ground effect zone. So in helicopters, the main effect from ground effect that we're going to see is the extra lift. And if you've flown a helicopter, you'll already know this because it's something that all helicopters make use of. But I need to prove it to you guys today, especially guys who don't have helicopters, that ground effect does affect us in our helicopters in DCS world. So we've got two ways of controlling our lift. Our lift force is a force that pushes us up, obviously. We've got, first of all, our throttle. And to keep that as a constant, we're just going to keep at full throttle, engine throttle, through the entire of the session on all of our aircraft. The other control we have is our collective. The collective, which is this lever here, is, if you like, it changes the airfoil of the rotors. It twists them. And that is what gives us, or can adjust, our lift force. So for instance, if I put our collective up, helicopters take us off, and so on. So the idea is, if there was no such thing as ground effect, then I would keep increasing my collective and my lift force until a certain point at which we would gain positive vertical rate, and then the helicopter would just take off and keep going up. But that doesn't actually happen in DCS world in real life, and the reason is because ground effect. So what will actually happen is that we'll be able to increase the throttle enough that will allow us, we'll increase the collective enough that will allow us to float around within a certain altitude limit of a few feet while we are in the ground effect zone. Remember, the ground effect zone is within one wingspan of the aircraft to the ground. So you can see that wingspan there of the rotors. We just turn that upside down on its side and it becomes the vertical distance kind of from there to about there. That's the region where we can get ground effect. And usually, as we found with the planes, the closer you are to the ground, if you're 2 or 3 feet from the ground, you'll get more ground effect than if you are 10 or 20 feet above the ground. So what I'm going to do now is increase my collective until our plane starts floating. Now that's not the same as positive rate. It's not going to climb. It's purely using ground effect. And this is what a lot of choppers will use to move around. So for instance, if a helicopter was so heavily loaded it could not get vertical rate, it could not take off, you could still move the helicopter around a couple of feet off the ground with ground effect. So you can see my collective on the top left there of the screen. I'm just going to move it about. So we've got a collective, a lift force at this point where we cannot get positive rate. The altimeter will not rise, but we can kind of float around on a cushion of air. It kind of feels a bit like a hovercraft. You can kind of see that maybe. You can see it's not quite off the ground. So what we'll do is we'll just give it a touch more. And what we don't want to do is increase our speed very much. If we increase our forward speed, we gain extra lift from that. It's just how helicopters work. So we're going to try and stay roughly stationary. I'm going to add a bit more collective there. So it should give us a cushion of a few feet under the skids now, based on ground effect. So let's go and have a look at that. Not quite yet. We're still kind of touching the ground a bit, so a tiny bit more. That feels like we're properly floating now. And again, we're not going to get positive rate. We're not actually going to get climb here because it's not enough to actually climb. It's just enough to float with ground effect. So let me just check outside now. It's hard to see with the smoke, but you see what I mean there. We're about 3 feet of ground effect float. And that will affect on the ground as the same as it will over the sea, so at least assuming it is a low swell, not big waves. See here. Okay, let's head back over land. So that is pretty much ground effect exhibited to you. What we'll do is we'll now add a little more upwards lift with the collective so that we can show the ground effect a little higher up. We'll need a bit more throttle for this. So I've added a little bit more, sorry, I keep saying throttle, of course I mean collective, I'm just too used to aeroplanes. I've added a bit more collective there, a bit more lift force, and we're still going to be in ground effect hover, but we're a few feet higher up now. See, we're about, I don't know, 8 feet there. So we're just about still within our wingspan zone, and we may be able to get a little bit more. Let's see if we can squeeze a little bit more out of it before we get positive rate. That feels like ground effect there. And after a while, when you've been doing it for a while, you just know what's ground effect and you know what is flying. It's ground effect again. We're now up about 15 feet in the air. We're getting to the limit of what our ground effect can do. The further we go up, the less effect it has, until it just disappears altogether. Okay, so now we're going to add some more collective until we actually start properly flying without ground effect and we get positive rate. At that point, the helicopter will just will rise, the altimeter will go up, and it will keep going up, basically. In simplified terms, it will keep going up forever. Of course, it doesn't work like that, because as we go up, we get less dense air, so it will actually bottom out at some point. But to keeping things simple, we'll just see that it will just keep going up. So we're going to add a bit more throttle now. And you can see we're going up now. So we've now got positive rate. We're now out of ground effect. And that altimeter will keep going up now until environmental conditions get such that we're just not efficient enough to keep rising. You can see? So the collective's staying the same, but we keep on rising. And that's the difference between positive rate flying and the ground effect. Okay, we're going to put the throttle down again now. Head down to ground effect. And ground effect causes a nice big cushion. It's like landing on a cushion. You can actually feel it in the aeroplane. And I feel it there. It's just, I feel it under me now. It's like just like driving on a cushion. And a high quality model like this is much easier to see than a lower quality helicopter. But that's it really. All I'll do now is I'll go and jump in another helicopter just to show you that it affects various helicopters. It's actually the first time I've tried this in the MAA, so let's just and again, it's kind of a feel thing. You feel that big cushion below you. But I can show you empirically with the collective at the top. So we're full throttle again. Right, we're just going to add enough collective, enough lift force that we can have our ground effect float. That feels, I'm not sure if that's a float or whether we're just on the wheels still, on the casters. No, we're on the casters, so let's keep going. Bouncing about on the wheels. Okay, that feels like ground effect. She's not stable as the Huey, so we just have to just be patient with her. She keeps pitching forward, which is a bit annoying, but there we go. Right, and that's our ground effect on our MAA. Our wheels are off the ground. She doesn't have enough collective to go to proper vertical rate flying, but she does have enough to exploit this level of ground effect. So let's try a little higher ground effect.
What you can do is at your current power setting, if you get enough forward momentum, you can actually lift off from the ground effect area without actually changing your power.
I will try that in just a second. So again, ground effect there of about 4 feet, 5 feet. Okay, so what Onslaught is saying is we can transition from ground effect into positive rate by getting forward motion in the aircraft. What we know from helicopters is if we have forward motion, possibly backwards motion as well, or side, I'm not sure, but motion, at least definitely forward, we can increase our lift that way. So I'm going to try that now. So I'm going to use this ground effect of 4 feet and see if we can do that. What altitude level did you need to manage that onslaught?
Not doesn't really matter as long as you get enough forward momentum.
So to get forward motion, I use the cyclic to angle the rotor plane down forwards. You see our rear speed's really speeding up. Still just at 4 feet of ground effect. And at some point, what I'll do when I'm fast enough is I'll pull back on the cyclic a little, and we can start transferring to positive rates. And there we go, we're up. I didn't know that was a thing, Onslaught. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I didn't realize it myself until I tried it.
Right, so that's one thing we can do. Okay, that's good. Now the other thing is it will also affect the aircraft, like when we were testing the fixed-wing planes, when we're travelling fast and low to the ground. The problem is I've got no real way of showing you that kind of empirically, testably, repeatably, because I can't just kind of fly perfectly straight and level like I can with an F-15, so I don't think I'm going to be able to show you that. But what I expect is the same kind of effects we got in the aeroplanes when going fast, that we can get a kind of spongy lift, and we will probably be able to possibly be able to decrease our drag and get a few knots extra speed than if we were flying above ground effects, again due to the physics that I just don't understand really. But I'm not going to show you that because I don't think I've got enough ability here to prove it to you. And just to show you, the collective hasn't changed from when I was doing ground effect floating at 4 feet. I'm still at the same collective. I've still got the same upwards force. The reason I've been able to do this is because I've got forward motion, and that has added extra lift, even though collective and throttle have stayed the same. What would happen if I became perfectly stationary now with this amount of collective is that I would actually fall back down until I hit that cushion of soft air again. But again, I don't think I've got the actual ability to show you that. That's ground effects in helicopters. Anything you want to add to that onslaught?
No, nothing much.
Right, that's all I've got to show. I hope that was of interest to you guys, and I'll see you later.